Mr. Oliver's arrival was marked by an unsettling energy. The office, usually a hive of cooperative activity, fell into a tense silence as he held his first meeting. His presence was imposing, not because of his stature, but because of the cold, calculating look in his eyes. We were all eager to hear his vision for the future, but what he unveiled was far from what we expected. "Good morning, everyone," Mr. Oliver began, his voice cutting through the silence. "I'm here to ensure this branch operates at peak efficiency. Effective immediately, I have revised the salary fund." There were murmurs of confusion and concern. Mrs. Harris, our dependable deputy personnel officer, glanced around, her eyes wide with worry. "Excuse me, Mr. Oliver," she interjected cautiously. "What do you mean by revised?" "I mean exactly what I said, Mrs. Harris. Salaries have been adjusted to reflect our new budgetary constraints. Many of you will see reductions in your pay starting this month." A ripple of shock passed through the room. I exchanged a look with Sarah, who sat next to me. She had been with the company for over a decade, and the news hit her hard. "This is outrageous," Sarah whispered under her breath. "Please, everyone, settle down," Mr. Oliver continued, raising a hand for silence. "This is a necessary step to keep this branch afloat." His words hung in the air, heavy and final. Mrs. Harris stood again, visibly shaking but resolute. "Sir, this decision is going to force many of our employees to leave. We already have trouble retaining staff, especially in roles like cleaning where the pay is already low. Then find replacements, Mrs. Harris. It's not my problem if you can't manage that." The meeting ended abruptly. Mr. Oliver's icy demeanor left no room for negotiation or debate. As we shuffled back to our desks, the mood was somber. The reality of his reign was beginning to set in. Later that day, I found myself in the break room with Mrs. Harris. She was sitting alone, staring at a list of employees, probably contemplating who might leave next. "It's not fair," I said, breaking the silence. "No, it isn't," she replied, sighing deeply. "But we have to do what we can. I'm not sure how we'll manage, especially with the cleaning staff. No one wants to work for such low pay." Dialogue in the break room? Me. "Mrs. Harris, do you think there's any way we can convince him to reconsider?" Mrs. Harris, shaking her head. "I doubt it. He's made up his mind. I just hope we can find a way to keep things running." Me. "Have you thought about bringing this up with Mr. Oscar? He might intervene." Mrs. Harris, sighing. "I've thought about it, but going over Mr. Oliver's head could backfire. For now, we need to focus on keeping this place from falling apart." Just then, the door opened, and Mr. Oliver walked in. His presence immediately stifled any further conversation. "Mr. Oliver, I hope you're not wasting time in here, Mrs. Harris. We have a lot of work to do." Mrs. Harris, standing quickly. "Of course, Mr. Oliver. I was just about to get back to it." As he left, I could see the strain in her eyes. We were all feeling it. The new director's reign had begun, and it was clear that it was going to be a rough ride. The office had just about settled into an uneasy routine under Mr. Oliver's harsh rule when Amelia walked in. It was a typical Monday morning, and the air was thick with the usual post-weekend dread. Mrs. Harris had spent another fruitless weekend trying to find a cleaner willing to work for the pittance Mr. Oliver offered, but it seemed her search had finally ended. Mr. Oliver had found Amelia stacking cardboard boxes near the dumpsters behind our building. He had watched her for a moment, a calculating gleam in his eye, before leaning out of his office window and calling to her. "Hey, you there. Come up to the office for a moment." Amelia had paused briefly, then continued her work, seemingly ignoring him. Mr. Oliver, undeterred and somewhat intrigued, set a security guard to fetch her. A few minutes later, Amelia stood in front of Mr. Oliver's desk. She was a slight woman in her 30s, with neatly tied back hair and clean, if worn, clothes. It was immediately obvious that she was deaf. She wore a hearing aid, but it looked old and ineffective. Mr. Oliver's eyes flicked to Mrs. Harris, who stood nearby, observing the scene with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Mr. Oliver, speaking slowly and loudly, "Do you want a job cleaning this office?" Amelia watched his lips intently, then nodded slowly. She didn't speak, but her eyes were clear and focused. Mrs. Harris, stepping forward, "Mr. Oliver, perhaps we should discuss this in more detail. We need to ensure she understands the terms." Mr. Oliver, waving her off, "Nonsense, Harris. It's a simple job. Cleaning. That's all. She understands." He turned back to Amelia and continued, still speaking exaggeratedly slow. "You will clean the office every day. You will be paid. Well, not much, but it's better than nothing, right?" Amelia nodded again. This seemed to satisfy Mr. Oliver, who looked over at Mrs. Harris with a triumphant grin. "Mr. Oliver, see. Problem solved. Maybe you should take notes, Harris. Sometimes you just need to take initiative." Mrs. Harris didn't reply, but I could see the worry lines deepening on her forehead. She turned to Amelia and gave her a sympathetic smile. "Let's get you started then, shall we?" Amelia began her first day by meticulously cleaning every corner of the office. She moved with a quiet efficiency, her movements precise and purposeful. It wasn't long before her efforts became noticeable. Desks were polished, floors sparkled, and the entire office took on a new shine. As I watched her work, I felt a pang of guilt. I had heard the whispers and the cruel jokes some of my colleagues were already making behind her back. They assumed she couldn't hear them, but I suspected otherwise. Amelia's expression never changed, but there was a quiet dignity in her demeanor that demanded respect. Dialogue in the hallway. Later that afternoon, I caught up with Sarah in the hallway. She looked troubled, and I knew the situation with Amelia was bothering her as much as it was me. "Me? What do you think of the new cleaner?" Sarah, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "I think Mr. Oliver is a heartless bastard. Hiring her to mock her? It's despicable." Me, "I agree. But Amelia, she's something else, isn't she? The way she just gets on with it." Sarah, nodding, "She's incredible, but I worry about how some of the others are treating her. It's not right." Me, "We need to make sure she knows not everyone here is like that. Maybe we can do something to help her feel more welcome." Sarah, smiling slightly, "I was thinking the same thing. Let's find a way." As the days turned into weeks, Amelia continued to impress us with her work ethic and resilience. The office, once a place of gloom and disarray, was now bright and orderly. It wasn't just the physical cleanliness that had improved. There was a subtle shift in the atmosphere as well. Amelia's quiet determination was starting to have an impact, even if most people didn't realize it yet. The new face in the office had brought with her a spark of change, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. Amelia's first few weeks in the office were a test of endurance, not just for her but for all of us who watched. Despite her diligent work and the pristine condition of the office, many of our colleagues took a perverse pleasure in mocking her. They seemed to relish the fact that she couldn't hear their insults. Or so they thought. It was during lunch one day that I first witnessed the cruelty firsthand. A group of employees were huddled together, whispering and snickering. Amelia was in the corner, wiping down a table, her back to them. Paul, loudly to ensure Amelia could see his lips moving. "Hey, do you think she even understands what she's doing? Maybe we should draw her a picture." The others laughed, and I felt a surge of anger. Me, standing up. "That's enough, Paul. Grow up." Paul turned to me, a sneer on his face. "What's your problem? It's just a joke." Me, "It's not funny. She's working hard, harder than any of us, and she deserves respect." Paul shrugged, but the laughter died down. Amelia continued her work, seemingly unaffected, but I noticed her movements had become more rigid, her shoulders tense. That evening, I found Amelia in the break room, cleaning the coffee machine. I hesitated at the door, not wanting to intrude, but she turned and saw me. Me. Hi, Amelia. Do you have a minute? She nodded, setting down the cloth she was using. I stepped inside, trying to think of the right words. Me. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for the way some people are treating you. It's not fair, and it is not right. She watched my lips carefully, then smiled and nodded. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small notepad and pen. Quickly, she scribbled a note and handed it to me. Thank you. It's okay. I've dealt with worse. Her resilience was humbling. I wanted to know more about her to understand what had brought her here. Me, speaking slowly, can I ask, how did you end up here? Working for Mr. Oliver. Amelia took back the notepad, her face thoughtful as she wrote. Lost everything in an accident. Needed a job. This was the only one I could get. Me. I'm sorry to hear that. But you're doing an amazing job. The office has never looked this good. She smiled again, a small, grateful smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was clear that her past weighed heavily on her, but she bore it with a quiet strength that was nothing short of remarkable. Dialogue in the break room. A few days later, Mrs. Harris approached me in the hallway. She looked worried, glancing around before speaking. Mrs. Harris, can I talk to you for a moment? It's about Amelia. Me, of course. What's wrong? Mrs. Harris, I'm worried about her. I've seen the way some of the staff treat her. It's cruel, and she doesn't deserve it. Me. I know. I've tried to stand up for her, but it's like talking to a wall with some of these people. Mrs. Harris, sighing. We need to do more. I'm thinking of organizing a meeting to address workplace behavior and respect. Maybe if we make it an official thing, it'll get through to them. Me. That's a great idea. I'll help in any way I can. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, Amelia continued to endure the ridicule with the same quiet dignity. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I saw her sitting on the steps outside. A small group of stray cats gathered around her. She was feeding them bits of her sandwich, her face serene. Dialogue outside the office. Me. Hey, Amelia. Looks like you have quite the audience. She looked up, smiling as she petted one of the cats. She pulled out her notepad again. They're my friends. They don't judge. Me. I'm glad you have them. And you have friends here too. You know, Mrs. Harris and I were on your side. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. Quickly, she wiped it away and wrote another note. Thank you. It means a lot. As the days passed, the meeting Mrs. Harris organized helped to curb some of the more overt bullying. But it was Amelia's unyielding perseverance that truly began to change hearts. Her work ethic, her kindness to the stray animals, and her quiet intelligence started to win people over. Even those who had once mocked her began to see her in a new light. Amelia's strength in the face of adversity was slowly transforming our office, one small act of resilience at a time. The office atmosphere remained tense under Mr. Oliver's rule. The once vibrant and cooperative workplace had become a realm of fear and frustration. The company's performance had plummeted, and Mr. Oscar, the owner, had started to take notice. Determined to understand the root of the problem, he devised a plan to install video cameras throughout the office. The announcement of a company-wide sanitization day was met with groans and eye rolls. Mr. Oliver, oblivious to the real reason behind the day off, seized the opportunity to lecture us on cleanliness one more time. Dialogue at the morning meeting. Mr. Oliver, standing at the head of the table, arms crossed. This sanitization day is exactly what this office needs. Maybe some of you will finally learn to keep this place clean. Mrs. Harris, quietly, yes, Mr. Oliver. We will ensure everything is in order. As we filed out of the meeting room, I caught up with Mrs. Harris. We shared a look of mutual frustration. Me, do you think this sanitization day will actually change anything? Mrs. Harris, sighing. I hope so. But I have a feeling there's more to it than just cleaning. She was right. While we were away, a team of technicians installed discrete cameras in every corner of the office, all linked to Mr. Oscar's computer. He wanted to see for himself what was going on, and he had every intention of catching Mr. Oliver in the act. When we returned the next day, everything seemed normal. There was no sign of the surveillance equipment, and Mr. Oliver carried on as usual, blissfully unaware that his every move was being watched. Dialogue in Mr. Oscar's office. Mr. Oscar, reviewing footage. I need to understand why this branch is failing. There has to be a reason. Technician, we've set up cameras in all key areas, sir. You should be able to get a clear picture of daily operations. As Mr. Oscar began to review the footage, it didn't take long for him to see the problem. Mr. Oliver's tyrannical behavior was on full display, from his harsh treatment of employees to his outright laziness and incompetence. But what caught Mr. Oscar's eye most was the figure of Amelia, the cleaner. Late at night, after everyone else had gone home, she stayed behind. At first, Mr. Oscar assumed she was just doing her cleaning duties, but then he saw her pull out a notepad and start working on something else entirely. She was drafting a business development plan, her movements deliberate and thoughtful. Mr. Oscar, leaning forward, intrigued. Who is this girl? Over the next few days, Mr. Oscar watched as Amelia worked tirelessly, cleaning the office to perfection and then spending hours drafting detailed plans and graphs. Her intelligence and dedication were evident, and Mr. Oscar realized that she was far more than just a cleaner. One evening, as he watched the footage, he saw Amelia complete a comprehensive business strategy. She left the document on Mr. Oliver's desk, neatly organized and ready for review. The next morning, Mr. Oscar was in the office early, eager to see Mr. Oliver's reaction. Dialogue in the office. Mr. Oliver, finding the document on his desk, frowning. What's this? Mrs. Harris, glancing over. It looks like a business development plan. Mr. Oliver, smirking. Must be one of my late-night ideas. I'll present it to Mr. Oscar. When Mr. Oliver presented the plan to Mr. Oscar later that day, claiming it as his own, Mr. Oscar's patience finally snapped. He summoned Mr. Oliver to his office. Dialogue in Mr. Oscar's office. Mr. Oscar, holding up the plan. You say this is your work, Oliver. Mr. Oliver, nervously, yes, sir. I worked on it for nights. Mr. Oscar, angrily, liar. I've been watching. I installed cameras to see what's really happening here. This plan is not your work. It's Amelia's. Mr. Oliver, stammering. I can explain. Mr. Oscar, enough. Pack your things and leave. You've done enough damage. As Mr. Oliver left the office, defeated and pale, Mr. Oscar turned his attention to Amelia. He called her into his office, determined to get to the bottom of her story. Dialogue with Amelia. Mr. Oscar, gesturing to a chair. Sit down, Amelia. I want to hear about you. Tell me your story. Amelia, surprised and a bit apprehensive, nodded. She began to speak in a low, clear voice, recounting her tragic past and her love for economics. Amelia, I lost everything in an accident. My fiancé, my hearing. I needed a job, and this was all I could find. But I've always loved business. It's my passion. Mr. Oscar, nodding. Your plan is brilliant. You have a real talent, Amelia. I want to offer you a new position, executive director of this branch. Amelia's eyes widened in shock and gratitude. For the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. Mr. Oscar had seen her potential, and he was giving her a chance to prove herself. With Amelia in charge, the office began to transform. Her strategic mind and compassionate leadership style breathed new life into the branch. Slowly but surely, the company's performance improved, and the once toxic atmosphere began to dissipate. Amelia's perseverance and hidden talents had not only saved the office, but had also earned her the respect and admiration of her colleagues. It was a new beginning for all of us, and it was all thanks to the eye in the sky that had revealed the truth. With Mr. Oliver gone and Amelia taking the reins as the new executive director, the office was buzzing with a mix of curiosity and hope. The toxic atmosphere that had lingered for so long was beginning to lift, replaced by a sense of optimism. Amelia's presence as a leader was a breath of fresh air, and her vision for the company was already starting to take shape. The day after Mr. Oliver's dismissal, Mr. Oscar called for a company-wide meeting. There was a palpable tension in the air as everyone gathered in the conference room, unsure of what to expect. Amelia stood quietly at the front, next to Mr. Oscar, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the nervous energy around her. Dialogue in the conference room. Mr. Oscar, raising a hand for silence. Good morning, everyone. As you all know, recent events have led to significant changes in our leadership. Today, I want to introduce you to your new executive director, Amelia. There were murmurs of surprise and a few skeptical glances. Amelia stepped forward, her expression composed. Amelia, thank you, Mr. Oscar. I know this transition has been sudden, and I appreciate your patience and support. My goal is to create a positive and productive work environment where everyone feels valued. Paul, raising his hand. Amelia, how do you plan to turn things around? We've been struggling for months. Amelia, nodding. That's a valid question, Paul. I've spent the past few weeks analyzing our operations and developing a comprehensive business plan. Our focus will be on improving efficiency, fostering collaboration, and investing in our people. I believe that by working together, we can achieve great things. There was a moment of silence as her words sank in. Then, slowly, people began to nod in agreement. It was clear that Amelia's thoughtful approach was resonating with them. Dialogue after the meeting. As the meeting concluded, I found myself standing next to Sarah. We watched as people began to disperse, many of them talking excitedly about the changes ahead. Sarah, smiling. I think she's going to do great things here. She's already got people talking. Me, yeah, it's amazing to see the difference already. It's like a weight has been lifted. Sarah, nodding. And it's not just about the business plan. It's her attitude, her willingness to listen and understand. That's what we need. Over the next few weeks, Amelia's impact on the office became increasingly evident. She implemented her business plan with precision, introducing new processes and encouraging open communication. Employees who had been demoralized and disengaged under Mr. Oliver's leadership began to thrive. There was a renewed sense of purpose and camaraderie. One afternoon, I walked into Amelia's office to find her deep in conversation with Mrs. Harris. They were discussing ways to improve employee morale and retention. Dialogue in Amelia's office. Mrs. Harris, smiling, it's incredible how much has changed in such a short time. People are starting to enjoy coming to work again. Amelia, nodding. That's the goal. A happy team is a productive team. I want everyone to feel like they're part of something meaningful. Me, knocking gently on the door. Excuse me, Amelia. I just wanted to say thank you. The office feels so different now, and I think we all really appreciate what you're doing. Amelia, smiling warmly. Thank you. It means a lot to hear that. We're all in this together, and I'm grateful for everyone's support. As I left her office, I couldn't help but feel inspired. Amelia's leadership was transforming not just the business, but the people within it. Dialogue in the break room. Later that day, I joined a few colleagues in the break room. The atmosphere was lively, with conversations flowing easily and laughter filling the space. Paul, laughing. I never thought I'd say this, but I actually look forward to coming to work now. Amelia's really turned things around. Sarah, smiling. It's true. She's got a way of making everyone feel important, like we're all part of something bigger. Me, and it shows in the results. Our numbers are already improving, and I think it's just the beginning. The unveiling of Amelia's talents and leadership had been a turning point for our branch. The office, once a place of dread and discontent, had become a hub of innovation and collaboration. Amelia's story of perseverance and resilience was an inspiration to us all, and under her guidance, we were ready to reach new heights. With Amelia at the helm, the office began to experience a remarkable transformation. Her leadership style, a blend of empathy and strategic acumen, infused the workplace with renewed energy and optimism. She believed in open communication, regularly holding meetings where everyone was encouraged to share their ideas and concerns. One of the first significant changes Amelia implemented was creating a more collaborative environment. She reorganized the office space, breaking down the physical barriers that had once isolated departments from each other. This simple yet effective change encouraged teamwork and fostered a sense of community. Dialogue in a team meeting. Amelia, standing at the front of the room. I want us to work more closely together. Collaboration is key to our success. Let's break down these walls, both literally and figuratively. Paul, raising his hand, does this mean we'll have more cross-departmental projects? Amelia, nodding. Exactly. I believe that by leveraging our collective skills and knowledge, we can achieve more than we ever could working in silos. This shift in focus brought immediate results. Teams that had previously been isolated began to work together seamlessly, sharing insights and supporting each other's goals. The office buzzed with the excitement of new ideas and innovative solutions. Dialogue in the new open office space. Sarah, grinning as she sets up her desk. I never thought I'd say this, but I love the new layout. It's so much easier to collaborate now. Me, nodding. I agree. I've already had some great brainstorming sessions with the marketing team. It feels like we're finally working as one big team. Sarah, and have you noticed how much happier everyone seems? It's like a weight has been lifted. Me. That's the Amelia effect. She's made such a difference. Amelia also introduced professional development programs, encouraging employees to pursue further education and training. She believed in investing in her team's growth, understanding that a well-trained, motivated workforce was essential to the company's success. Dialogue in a training session. Amelia, addressing the group. I want each of you to have the opportunity to grow and advance in your careers. These training sessions are just the beginning. Let's make the most of them. Mrs. Harris, nodding in agreement. I've been here for years, and I've never seen such a commitment to employee development. It's truly inspiring. Paul, it's great to know that we're valued not just for what we can do today, but for our potential in the future. As the weeks turned into months, the company's performance metrics began to improve significantly. Sales were up, customer satisfaction was at an all-time high, and employee turnover had dropped dramatically. Amelia's vision was becoming a reality, and the once struggling branch was now a beacon of success within the company. One afternoon, Mr. Oscar called a meeting to commend Amelia and the team for their hard work. There was a palpable sense of pride and accomplishment in the room. Dialogue in the conference room. Mr. Oscar, smiling. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible turnaround we've seen here. Amelia, your leadership has been transformative. And to all of you, thank you for your dedication and hard work. This is just the beginning. Amelia, beaming. Thank you, Mr. Oscar. This success belongs to all of us. I'm proud of what we've achieved together, and I'm excited for the future. Paul, raising his hand. Amelia, what's next for us? How do we keep this momentum going? Amelia, we continue to innovate and support each other. We keep learning and growing. Most importantly, we stay true to our values and work as a team. The meeting ended with a round of applause, and as I looked around the room, I saw the faces of my colleagues filled with hope and determination. We were no longer just employees. We were a team united by a shared vision and a leader who believed in us. Dialogue in the break room. Me, can you believe how far we've come? It's like we're a completely different company. Sarah, smiling. It's amazing what a difference good leadership makes. Amelia has brought out the best in all of us. Me. And it's not just about the numbers. It feels good to come to work again, to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Sarah, here's to a bright future. I'm excited to see what we can achieve together. As we clinked our coffee cups in a toast to the future, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Amelia had given us more than just a new beginning. She had given us the belief that we could be better, do better, and achieve great things. And for that, we would always be thankful. With the office thriving under Amelia's leadership, there was an air of stability and optimism that hadn't been felt in years. The changes she had implemented were bearing fruit, and the company was now a model of efficiency and innovation. However, it wasn't just the professional sphere that was transforming. Amelia's personal life was also on the cusp of profound change. Dialogue in Mr. Oscar's office. One evening, Mr. Oscar called Amelia into his office. There was something different about his demeanor, an uncharacteristic nervousness. Mr. Oscar, clearing his throat. Amelia, there's something I'd like to discuss with you. It's personal. Amelia, tilting her head, curious. Of course, Mr. Oscar. What's on your mind? Mr. Oscar, taking a deep breath. Over the past months, I've come to admire not just your work ethic and intelligence, but your kindness and resilience. I've found myself thinking about you often, and I realized I have feelings for you. Amelia was momentarily stunned, her heart racing. She had always respected Mr. Oscar, but this confession was unexpected. Amelia, softly, I don't know what to say. I respect you greatly, and I've come to care for you as well. Mr. Oscar, smiling, would you consider exploring this further? Perhaps over dinner? Amelia's smile lit up her face, and she nodded. I'd like that very much. Their relationship blossomed over the next few months, built on mutual respect and admiration. Mr. Oscar's support for Amelia extended beyond the professional realm as he became her confidant and partner in every sense. The office buzzed with the news of their relationship, and it was clear to everyone that their union was a source of strength and inspiration. Dialogue with Mrs. Harris. One afternoon, Mrs. Harris approached Amelia with a knowing smile. Mrs. Harris, I always knew there was something special about you two. You make a wonderful couple. Amelia, blushing, thank you, Mrs. Harris. It's all been a bit overwhelming, but I'm very happy. Mrs. Harris, and you deserve every bit of that happiness. You've worked so hard, and it's wonderful to see you finally getting the love and support you need. Amelia, I couldn't have done it without you and the team. We're all in this together. Mrs. Harris, absolutely. And speaking of support, I wanted to talk to you about expanding our employee wellness program. I think it's something that could really benefit the team. Amelia, nodding. That's a great idea. Let's work on it together. Amelia's personal happiness only seemed to enhance her professional success. The office continued to flourish, and employees felt more valued and motivated than ever. Mr. Oscar's belief in Amelia was unwavering, and together they steered the company toward new heights. Dialogue in the office lobby. One day, as Amelia was leaving the office, she was approached by Paul. Paul, Amelia, can I talk to you for a minute? Amelia, of course, Paul. What's up? Paul, shuffling his feet. I just wanted to say thank you. You've changed this place, and I think we're all better for it. I know I've been one of the skeptics, but you've won me over. Amelia, smiling. Thank you, Paul. That means a lot to me. It's been a team effort, and I'm grateful for everyone's hard work and support. Paul. Well, if there's ever anything I can do to help, just let me know. Amelia. I appreciate that, Paul. We're building something great here, and it's thanks to people like you. As the company continued to thrive, Amelia and Mr. Oscar's relationship deepened. They spent their weekends renovating the shelter Mr. Oscar had bought for her pets. It became a place of love and comfort, not just for the animals, but for them as well. Dialogue at the shelter. Mr. Oscar, hammering a nail into a new fence. This place is really coming together. I can see how happy it makes you. Amelia, petting a cat. It's more than I ever dreamed of. Thank you for this, Oscar, for everything. Mr. Oscar, putting down the hammer and walking over to her. You've brought so much joy into my life, Amelia. This is just the beginning. Amelia, I'm excited for what the future holds. For us, for the office, and for our furry friends here. Their wedding was a small, intimate affair attended by close friends, family, and colleagues. It was a celebration of love and resilience, marking the start of a new chapter in their lives. As Amelia stood beside Mr. Oscar, looking out at the smiling faces of those who had supported them, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Her journey had been filled with hardship and challenges, but it had also led her to this moment of pure happiness and stability. Dialogue at the wedding. Mrs. Harris, raising a glass to Amelia and Oscar. May your life together be filled with love, joy, and endless success. Amelia, teary-eyed. Thank you, everyone. Your support means the world to us. We're looking forward to many happy years together. Mr. Oscar, here's to new beginnings and to building a future where we all thrive. Cheers. As the guests raised their glasses and toasted to the future, Amelia knew that she had finally found her place in the world. With love and stability by her side, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The office, the shelter, and her life were all reflections of her strength and perseverance, and she couldn't wait to see what the future would bring.